Alright, fine. Somebody's gotta step up. Somebody's gotta say it, and I guess it's gonna have to be me, Ray from Ray's Nintendo Talk. I am stepping up to be the official Luigi's Mansion YouTuber because I don't see anybody else talking about this series. I don't see anyone else clamoring for Luigi's Mansion 4. I don't see anyone talking about this series, going in depth on it, predicting its future, and I would very much like to consume content such as that, and I just don't see any of it. I don't see it. And also, where is Luigi's Mansion 4? Let's talk about that for a minute. It's been so long since Luigi's Mansion 3 absolutely outsold all expectations for Nintendo, and we would have guessed by now we would hear something for a sequel to that, Luigi's Mansion 4. And I know, it's a new console, right? It's a new generation, and every IP is going to have to wait in line until it gets revealed, just like Smash, just like Animal Crossing, 3D Mario, Zelda, all of those IP. But now, if you really think about it, Luigi's Mansion would have been the perfect game to put on this console within the first year, and I can almost guarantee that we will not see a Luigi's Mansion 4 for this year, and if at earliest we will see something in September or whatever that direct is going to be for the next year. Luigi's Mansion 4 does not seem to most like something that they would want to push out on their first or second year, but I thought, hey, predicting for this year, going into the Nintendo Switch 2 year, before we even knew what the console was, I predicted that the big game for this year was going to be a 3D Mario game, a Mario Kart game, and a Luigi's Mansion 4, because I thought they were going to want to try and expand their IPs even further, and I ended up being correct that they did want to expand their IPs and add another tentpole IP to their list of IPs, and that ended up being Donkey Kong. They ended up giving Donkey Kong that treatment that I was really hoping Luigi's Mansion 4 would get, and I couldn't be happier. Donkey Kong Bonanza is one of my favorite games ever made already. I loved Donkey Kong Bonanza, and yet I am very frustrated now at the lack of a Luigi's Mansion 4 announcement, and I know I've said this already, all the other people are waiting in line as well, all these other communities are waiting as well, but even within like Reddit, I can see no one, and that's the topic I am here to discuss today. Where are all the Luigi's Mansion fans? Because if I even go to YouTube and type in Luigi's Mansion and Google that, there are different videos talking about the series itself, a big compilation of the cutscenes, a bunch of shorts, an animation about it, sure, a review from IGN, then we have ourselves a bunch of trailers from Nintendo themselves, and a couple of fun, unique ideas from other people in the community, but nothing concrete, nothing like Zelda channels or Mario channels or anything like that. Even if you Google Luigi's Mansion Reddit and you go to the one place where you would think everyone who could possibly want to talk about this franchise would be, only 18,000 members? Now listen, I am not at all trying to stir things up. I'm not trying to say Luigi's Mansion fans do not exist. I'm not at all trying to say that this series should be bigger or smaller than it is. I am just saying, for how ridiculously well Luigi's Mansion 3 sold, 14 million copies of that game, how in the world is it that there is no one ever talking about Luigi's Mansion on the internet ever? Because if you really think about it, a ton of other very small franchises get 10 times more discussion than Luigi's Mansion does. Look at Persona, for example. People love Persona. I love Persona. Persona 5 is one of my favorite video games ever made. It's so good, and people talk about it everywhere. There are constant videos being made about this series. You can't go anywhere without hearing its music in the background of videos. This series is so popular, and yet Persona 5 only sold 3.2 million copies, and Persona 5 Royal only sold 4 million copies. And if you combine every single piece of Persona 5 media, that counts Royal, the initial version, Strikers, other spin-off games, it barely exceeds 10 million units. Luigi's Mansion 3 outsells every single piece of Persona 5 media you could ever think of, and no one talks about it. Even small Nintendo franchises like Kirby is not that much bigger than Luigi's Mansion. Sure, it has really outdone itself with Kirby and the Forgotten Land, especially getting that Switch 2 edition. Now we have Kirby Air Riders, and it seems like we have always been getting little tiny Kirby small bite games every single year of this console's lifespan, and we keep getting more and more Kirby content, and I keep seeing people talking about how much they love Kirby, wanting more Kirby games, can't wait for the next Kirby game, and no one ever talks about Luigi's Mansion. Now, why is that? Well, I have a little bit of a theory, because it was a very niche franchise before the Nintendo Switch came around and before Luigi's Mansion 3 released on the console. And here we are right now, this chart on the screen. Man, first of all, this chart is just a little bit of a throwback for my channel specifically. My very first video on this channel was about Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. So please do not go back and watch that. It was a terrible video. But this chart right here, I'm going to rehash some of those old points and add a couple of new ones here. The very first Luigi's Mansion launched on the GameCube and released at 3.3 million units across that game's lifespan. That was a very successful new game, new IP for Nintendo, especially considering they went out on the limb of having that be their launch title for the GameCube. Not a Mario game, not a Mario Kart game, not a Zelda game, or an Animal Crossing, which wasn't even that big yet, but they didn't have their big IPs out in the front. They had Luigi's Mansion lead the way. And I will be perfectly upfront with you, I have still not yet gotten the chance to play that first game, but I know enough about it from videos and other playthroughs that I have seen, and I cannot wait for it to release on the GameCube NSO, especially considering I just picked up that GameCube controller. I cannot wait to play all of those games on my GameCube controller. But moving forward here, Luigi's Mansion 1 sold at 3.33 million units, and that is a solid start to a first game in a new IP. I believe ARMS also sold something very similar, and it could have a very similar future for Nintendo if they wanted to bring something like that back, because we know Luigi is a very popular character in the Mario universe, and honestly, so many of Mario's characters could get their own spin-off series, and if the idea was strong enough, if the core gameplay was fun enough, all of them could thrive, and Nintendo knows that, and Luigi is one of those main characters that they can really thrive with. And Luigi's Mansion is an amazing franchise. It is a wonderful idea that they started with on that GameCube there. Now, they were thinking they probably wanted to give the series another chance because they wanted to grow their IPs. They want more big franchises that they can lean upon and be able to use for their consoles to help spread out the lifespan of their generations, as well as just making more fun games for people to enjoy. But the main thing to take away from Luigi's Mansion 1 is that it was a solid seller. People really got into it. It was a cult classic. And then almost a decade later, they decided with their 3DS, they wanted to revamp the series in a new light. And of course, that did not go incredibly well for them in terms of how many people thought it was better than the first iteration. But we were able to see here that it sold twice the amount of the initial game. 6.48 million units for Luigi's Mansion 2 or Dark Moon. Luigi's Mansion 2 was a downgrade, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinions, from the first game, and I really do think it had a lot to do with the idea of the 3DS itself. They wanted to create games that were bite-sized experiences. That way, whenever you took it, wherever you were taking it, on a bus ride, on the way to work, in the car, or even if you were just playing it at home right before someone were to come over, it's a portable console, and they wanted you to play it as such. If you are sitting down at a Nintendo Wii or a Wii U or a Switch or any sort of home console, you are probably going to spend a lot of time on the TV with big experiences because you're sitting down, you're picking up a controller, and you are dedicating yourself to that time period. But if you are playing something that is exclusively handheld, like a Switch Lite, like a 3DS, like a Game Boy, those experiences are inherently going to be shorter for a lot of people, because if you're taking them on the go, you're probably not able to sit down and invest as much time in them as you would with a home console. So a lot of those games, including like Mario 3D Land, Kirby, and the Planet Robobot, and the new Super Mario Bros. Series, all of them were very small, bite-sized experiences in which you could hop in and out of a level to play whenever and however you wanted. And that was no exception for Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. A lot of people were very critical of the mission-based structure of this game because in Luigi's Mansion on the GameCube, the whole point was that you were in a singular mansion and you were working through area by area to defeat the portrait ghosts and get Mario at the very end of the game. And as far as things were for Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, it was just very different. You were going from mansion to mansion, and even within those mansions, you couldn't stay within it to complete all of the levels at once and complete all of the objectives to move forward. You would have to go back and forth from Egad's laboratory to the mansion for each level, and some of these had like 6 or 7 to where you would have to constantly be going in and out and disrupting that gameplay experience. Why could they not have just made it to where you were staying in the entire mansion the entire time? But a lot of people were also very understanding of that 3DS model. They just realized that it wasn't a better version than the first one. Sure, the game looked better, it sold better, and it started to become apparent to Nintendo that this series had some serious potential. So what do you do, my friends, when you have a series with unlimited potential, with a fan base that apparently continues to buy these games even though they appear to be nowhere online, and yet so many good ideas and so many bad ideas as well could be utilized and changed for the better? What do you do when you have that? Well, you take the good and you throw away the bad, and you end up with Luigi's Mansion 3. Everything that was good about the series, everything that sucked about the series was changed for the better in Luigi's Mansion 3. This game is amazing. And of course, the one thing that everyone seems to talk about with this game is how gorgeous it looks. Whenever I hear anyone making any sort of passing comment about Luigi's Mansion 3, it's always to talk about their graphics, and this game is graphically the best the console had to offer. I still think it is the best on the system. This game sold an absurd 14 million units on the Nintendo Switch and led to a big acquisition of Next Level Games for Nintendo. Now this is where the story starts to get a little bit more interesting. We start to get to more of the topic of this video. What in the world is happening with Luigi's Mansion 3 popularity? Because it could reflect the quality of the game itself, how many people were raving about it, how many people were maybe giving this series a new chance that didn't really care about investing in it long term, but just wanted to see what everyone was talking about. How much of these sales numbers represent the future of this series, and how many of these sales numbers only represent this game being lightning in a bottle? Well, to be honest, we don't have a lot to go off of right now, but a big indicator of what the future of this series could be lies within the unfortunate circumstances that surround both of these games' remakes. Luigi's Mansion 1 got a remake for the 3DS, and Luigi's Mansion 2 got an HD port to the Nintendo Switch. As we can see here on this chart, Luigi's Mansion did not sell well at all on the 3DS. It sold under 500,000 copies, and the Nintendo Switch version of Luigi's Mansion 2 HD sold just under 2 million at 1.8 million. Let's talk about Luigi's Mansion 1 on the 3DS first. That game released back in 2018, a year in which everyone could not have been more shocked to see this game coming to the 3DS and not to the Nintendo Switch. At the time of this game's announcement, we had no idea that Luigi's Mansion 3 was coming out just that next year, and so it was very confusing for a lot of people to see the Nintendo Switch absolutely taking off, skyrocketing, launching Nintendo into the new and biggest and brightest golden era of their entire company's history. And yet, we are getting a Luigi's Mansion port to the 3DS, a console that is on not only its last leg, but its last toe. This game was set up for failure just from the very start. Plainly speaking, no one was buying and playing 3DSs back in 2018. People were buying Switches and playing those games, and that was the console that Nintendo needed to push forward here. But Next Level Games decided to put this game on the 3DS, and that is probably this game's biggest reason for why it was such a failure. Moving on to Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, this is pretty apparent to me as well, and unfortunately, I think it is apparent, but at the same time, it also is indicative of the crowd that did not care to buy this game. Luigi's Mansion 2 HD released in June of last year. It is just over a year old, and it did not crack 2 million, and I guarantee you there have been like 3 financial reports since then. If it had passed 2 million units, they would have reported it by now, and we would know. So that means this game stopped selling. It fell off a cliff right after its initial release. People who wanted it bought it, and no one else cared. Nintendo games are pretty famous for having very, very long legs in terms of their best games continuing to sell across the entire lifespan of a console. Well, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD would have been one of those, I think, if they had released it a little bit sooner after the hype of Luigi's Mansion 3, but they waited, and they waited, and they waited. It was 5 years after Luigi's Mansion 3 released that we finally got a HD port of this game, and they didn't do anything to fix it. They didn't update this game in any way. They only added the HD filter, and that was it. They made it run a little bit better, look a little bit better, and that's all. People were pretty disappointed with this, and last year was kind of the year of ports and remakes and just smaller budget titles for Nintendo. We had Princess Peach Showtime, Thousand Year Door, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, Mario and Luigi Brothership, all of these very niche and small franchises. And to be honest, it could be easy for me to see how people were really burned out on Mario last year. There was a lot of Mario related IP release. And not only that, but Luigi's Mansion 3 had been 5 years old. Again, let me just say, 5 years old, and Next Level Games moved on right after that game to make the next Battle League for Mario Strikers, and that game was pretty bad in my opinion, in a lot of people's opinions. It was probably the worst Mario sports game on the Nintendo Switch, and yet we have not heard a peep from them since that game released back in, I believe, 2022. So all of this comes to a head right after Luigi's Mansion 3, right after the acquisition of Next Level Games and the creation of Mario Battle League. This next game is going to be coming within the next year or two. I am still confident Luigi's Mansion 4 is on the way. Nintendo has to be trying to establish these new IPs. They have to have seen and taken into account the wildly successful Luigi's Mansion 3 sales numbers, and all of that leads to my point. I am observing a phenomena I have not seen hardly in anything like this series has. This series is popular enough, in my opinion, in terms of sales numbers to have at least a cult classic following, to have at least a bunch of people making videos about it, talking about it online, going on Reddit boards and Famo boards and whatever other boards online you could talk. That is where people should be going, and yet they're not. And we also see, with Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, there were only about 1.8 million people that decided to splurge on that game. So that tells me people did not care about the second game in one way or another, whether or not the bad press of people talking about it being a low-effort port for $60 full, a 3DS game launching at, I believe, was $40 at the time, and now it's $20 more expensive simply just to be on the Switch and be in HD. Maybe all of that got to the people and that's why they didn't buy it, and yet people are still waiting, but that's it, right? I don't think anyone's waiting. I don't think there are hardly any people that are actively thinking about Luigi's Mansion as much as I am, or as much as some other people out there might be. There just aren't enough people that care. Plain and simple. I think those 14 million people that bought Luigi's Mansion 3 are not going to carry over to the Switch 2 generation, are not going to carry over to the future of this franchise, and that makes me incredibly sad. But right now, all I can observe is telling me nothing is happening with this series in terms of its growth, in terms of people actually caring about it. Because with Kirby, we can see a tiny uptick in all of the games being received well. How many people are out there that talk about Kirby is insane. With stuff like Persona, that series skyrocketed with the 5th entry, and people are continuing to get into that. With Luigi's Mansion, I don't see that same effect, and what that tells me is that the popularity just isn't there. And Nintendo has to see these sales numbers and think, surely people are going to want to buy Luigi's Mansion 4, and I really do think that those people who bought the 3rd installment will care about a 4th game that looks even better graphically and even more complex gameplay-wise. But for now, my running theory is that this franchise just doesn't stick in people's minds the same way that Mario or Zelda does, the same way that Kirby does for some people, that Metroid does for so many. Metroid has not had a single game sell over 3 million units ever. And yet that series always has more fans, it seems in my opinion, to Luigi's Mansion. Luigi's Mansion does not get talked about as much as Metroid does. It just doesn't. It doesn't get talked as if it's one of those big boy titles that sold as well as it did, even though it did. And that's how I'm going to circle back around here now. If no one's going to take up that mantle, I will. I will be the Luigi's Mansion guy. I will talk about this series and theorize what I think could come next if y'all want that. Or if there are people out there that are talking about this that I just don't know of, that I'm not aware of, that people are not seeing, please let me know all that and more down in the comments. I want to know more about that. I want to know if there is a secret place where people are talking about Luigi's Mansion. I want to go there. Where are y'all at? There has to be people, but for now, my theory is just that there aren't people that care enough about the franchise to continuously talk about it in the ways that people do other franchises, and that makes me very sad, but it is the only thing that makes enough sense for me to understand it, because if you were really, really excited about a franchise, it wouldn't matter when the games were coming, if you thought it had a bright future or not, if the games were good or bad, ports or not ports, you would be talking about it, and you would see people talking about it, and I can't find that people anywhere. I can't find those crowds anywhere. And lastly, let me just talk a little bit more about Luigi's Mansion 3. Was it lightning in a bottle? I don't think it was. Like I said earlier, I think people who bought the 3rd game and really did appreciate it, loved its charm, loved its style, and moved on from it, I think those same people can be captivated by the 4th game once again, because they are definitely going to make a 4th one. But what was it? What was it about that game specifically? Well, it was very polished. People loved the idea of a very polished Nintendo game looking this good. It was cared for like no other game. This game looked like it had been in development for over 20 years. They listened as well. People in the Luigi's Mansion community, wherever y'all are, I've heard before people talking about the second game and the mission structure and that frustration with that, and then the first game not having enough to do. It was a very, very short game, but it was still very charming. They decided to increase the length from the first and second game and make all of the second game's flaws strengths in this Luigi's Mansion 3 game and bring back the best stuff from the first. They listened. They made the games better. They listened to the critiques and they applied them. They applied them very well. The marketing was also fantastic. I mean, you saw this in every Nintendo Direct leading up to its release. You saw reminders of it, you saw release dates coming out, and it was towards that October holiday season, right? People were going out and they were buying games that fall and that winter, and what were they buying? They were buying Pokemon, and what else were they buying? Link's Awakening, and look at that, Luigi's Mansion 3. They were buying all of these games, and it was around that October month, that spooky Halloween season, that people were getting down with Luigi. I think this game also had legs unlike some of these other games did, and that continued to baffle me and baffles me to this day. Luigi's Mansion 3 sold well and continued to sell well throughout the entire lifespan of the Switch. Whenever you buy a new console, you are always willing to buy whatever games are coming out within that first couple years because you want to justify your purchase. You want to have a reason to play the new console you bought and to continue to play the new console that you bought because within those first few years, it's just the most pivotal. And with those first years, we were able to get a bunch of brand new IPs out in the sunlight. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is a perfect example of that. It is the most controversial game in the series by far, and it is a perfect series. I love Xenoblade. It is amazing, and yet that game sold the most, even though it is considered by so many to be the worst, because it released within the first year of the Switch's life. People were willing to buy it. It was in December. There was really nothing else going on that time of that year, and so they bought Xenoblade, and it worked very well for the series moving forward. In that second year, we had Mario Tennis Aces, which sold pretty well. We had Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze sell very well. We had at the very end of the year, Smash Brothers go on to be amazing. Super Mario Party was phenomenal. In the third year, we had a whole bunch of other games. Super Mario Maker 2, Luigi's Mansion 3 being one of them, of course, Link's Awakening, Sword and Shield. We had plenty of experimental games from all across the IP that Nintendo owned, and Nintendo really doubled down on that idea with the Switch 2, releasing so many random games within this first year, and I think they're hoping that it has a similar impact like Luigi's Mansion does. It's for all of those reasons and more that I think Luigi's Mansion 3 just sold very well, but it comes down to it having been just a good game. Good games tend to sell well. Good games that have good gameplay hooks, that have great marketing, that have perfect timing, always tend to do well. You need a bunch of things to go right, and I think this game had everything go right just at the right time, and more so. People were going out of their way to play this game, and I saw all those playthroughs back in 2019, 2020. YouTube channels that normally wouldn't play that kind of game decided to go out and buy it and play it, and people loved it. People watched it. Luigi's Mansion 3 was so amazing. And I just don't know where everybody is or what's next for the future of this series. It has to be coming within the next couple years. I am confident of that. And yet, what is it going to look like? How many people are going to buy it? What is going to happen? We don't know. These are so many unanswered questions, and it is a little bit jarring to me to see how little Luigi's Mansion 2 HD sold, even with all of the understandable circumstances surrounding that game's release. It is frustrating, because I guess if you're going to buy a Luigi's Mansion game, you're going to get the third one, not the second one. And the second one was my first exposure to the series. I played it back in the 3DS when it released. I remember loving and adoring that game, and I still have nostalgia for it. I still enjoy it. It's still a great game, but it is not at all close to the levels of Luigi's Mansion 3. So that's pretty much all I got for you today. Where are y'all at? I don't know. Hopefully this video finds a bunch of you, because Luigi's Mansion tends to not do well on this channel either. So maybe it just doesn't exist. Maybe you guys don't exist, but we will see where y'all are at. Sound off in the comments if you're a big Luigi's Mansion fan and cannot wait for the fourth one just like me. Make sure you like and subscribe today's video if you enjoyed the content. I appreciate that a lot and it helps out the channel. Click that notification bell to know exactly when my videos release, and consider joining my membership program if you want early access to all of my videos and just want to support me as a content creator. Make sure you click on the left side of your screen if you want to see why Luigi's Mansion 3 is so special to me, and click on the right side of your screen to see my review of Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. Make sure you have yourself a phenomenal day. This has been Ray's Nintendo Talk. I have been Ray, and I will see you all in the next video.